Kirakoto and Assalamu alaikum. My name is Arij Arif and I'm an educational psychologist. In today's video, I will be discussing supporting children through grief. So children have difficulty expressing their needs, whether it be physical or emotional through words, and they tend to express those needs behaviorally instead, so through behaviors. So for example, a child may be defiant or act out if they are upset by a change in routine instead of simply telling you that they're upset by the change in routine. It's actually helpful to think of your child's behavior as communicating a need to you rather than thinking that your child has inherently changed as a result of a particular event or trauma, because that way we can work to meet those needs. So today I'm going to discuss 5 common needs following a crisis that you could explore with your children to help identify the source of their behaviors and support them. So these needs are: they need to be informed, they need to be involved, to feel safe and reassured, to feel heard and acknowledged, and to feel connected. Now let's discuss each of them in turn. So the first one is the need to be informed. Now, when an event happens around the child that causes changes in the immediate environment and context of the child needs to be informed, at least to some extent, about what is going on. So you can choose how much you share with the child depending on their age and make the information age appropriate. But sometimes what I see is parents and adults around the child completely dismissing the idea that the child needs to be informed and having this false perception that the child's unaware of their surroundings and doesn't realize what's going on. So for example, if we're talking about, let's say, the sentencing that's coming up, if for a teenager or for a child that's nearing the age of being a teenager, then you might want to actually run them through the process of what's going to happen, what the media is talking about, because children of that age group will get information regardless. They have the ability to acquire information from social media through their friends, and a lot of this information might actually be inaccurate. So it might be better for you as a parent or an adult around the child to sit down with them and properly inform them about what's happening. Whereas for a younger child, you might just let them know that you might be occupied for the week. Someone else might be picking them up or dropping them off from school if you are busy attending the sentencing, for example, and explain to them that you have something important to attend to, but just letting them know at least that there's going to be a change in routine. The second need is the need to be involved. So children, especially children who have lost a loved one, they, for their own healing, in order to process their own grief, they need to be involved in the activities surrounding anything related to the deceased. So for example, when the Christchurch attacks happened, it might have been important to involve the children in things like, depending on what you felt was appropriate for your child, but things like janazah, burials, funerals, things that might have happened afterwards. If you didn't involve your children during that time, I don't want you to stress out about that. This conversation here is really about focusing on the present and what we can do now and into the future. So there are other things that you can do to involve your children and help them in that healing process from now onwards. So some of the things that you can do is if, for example, you have an older child and you feel like they can cope with the sentencing, then that might be something that you would consider involving them in. Even if they don't attend, maybe you can fill them in after the sentencing with what's going on. But for younger children, there are other things we can do to keep them involved in processes related to the person who has passed away. So we have a really nice hadith that can guide us as to what we can do with our children. عن أبي هريرة رضي الله عنه أن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم قال: إذا مات ابن آدم انقطع عنه عمله إلا من 3: صدقة جارية أو علم ينتفع به أو ولد صالح يدعو له. رواه Muslim. So what this hadith translates to is that The messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, when a person dies, his deeds come to an end except for three: a continuous charity, a knowledge from which benefit is gained, or a righteous child who prays for him. So these are three things we can still do with our children to honor the person that has passed away, or to keep them involved with things that we do for that person. So if you want to start a charity, involve your kids with that. It could be something as simple as feeding a cat. We all know the Islamic perspective of kindness to animals and the rewards that can be reaped from that. But also remind them that anybody who prays for a deceased person will benefit the deceased. However, there is a special honor to the person's child when they pray for that deceased person. So if the child is quite young, you might want to guide them in what prayers they should say. Give them a timing of the day where you can do it together to encourage them, and that way they feel like they're doing something, they feel like they're involved in the process, and actually will help them with their healing. So the third need is the need to be heard and acknowledged. Sometimes when children act out behaviorally for a particular reason, and this particular behavior, let's say it started to happen more often after a particular event or after a trauma, and it's just persisted, one of the needs that you might want to explore is the need to feel heard and acknowledged. Now, sometimes the behavior that they're exhibiting might seem quite silly, like every morning they wake up, they're starting to cry and they just don't want to put their shoes on. And you might feel like, I don't want to sit down and have to deal with this. But the really important thing to do is really to sit down with your child and hear them out. Even if what they're saying comes across as silly to you, and their reasoning for not wanting to put their shoes on might come across as silly to you, the objective of that conversation is for them to feel like they're actually being heard by you and their feelings are actually being acknowledged. So just listen to them and hear them out. After they're finished telling you about, what it is that they don't want to be doing, then try to help them to identify their feelings, because sometimes kids cannot label what emotions that they're going through. They could be telling them things like, I see that you're really distressed about putting your shoes on and going to school in the morning. I really am feeling that and hearing that from your voice and behavior. I feel like I can see that you're frustrated. I can see that you're angry. Help them label what it is that they're feeling so that later on they can actually put those into words. It's important to avoid statements like stop crying, or you're a big boy, you have to be a big boy, because what that does, it belittles their emotions. And in the long run, it might actually cause them to bottle up their emotions and not want to express things to you because, they feel like they're not being understood. A better way to approach it is actually to be the one, because children look to adults to understand how to behave in the world. So it would be a more effective way to actually model that it is normal to have emotions. So you can just tell your children that you sometimes feel the same way. If the child is refusing to put their clothes on and go to school in the morning, you can tell them, you know what, I'm actually feeling really angry today as well, and I'm really frustrated. I had a really bad night, and I don't really feel like waking up and going to work. So I can really understand, I actually do understand where you're coming from. And then after you've kind of named the emotion, then you problem solved. After the child feels that they're heard and understood, and you get kind of past that emotional stage, then you can problem solve and talk about, okay, what are other things that we can do? How can I help you feel better this morning? And how can we structure our day so that maybe you can have a better start to the day? And over time, now obviously, I don't want you to think that you can have this conversation once and that's it, the behavior will disappear. So this will require some patience and consistency on your part as well. So the fourth need is the need for safety and reassurance. So kids need to feel safe in the world around them, because they know that that the world around them is really big, and they look to adults to provide them with that direction. So that's why for a lot of kids, routine is very important, because with routine comes predictability, comes control, and comes safety. So the child is actually constantly testing limits in their world to check if their world is still safe. Some people perceive when kids test limits, and some kids, a lot of people perceive that as a child being mischievous or naughty, but actually for the majority of kids, it's actually their way just to see if their world is still safe. So after a big event, after there's a lot of changes happen in a family, the child's need to feel safety increases, and they might begin to test the limits more to check if their parent or the adults that remain around them are actually still in control. It's important to note, though, that grief could be an explanation of behavior. So if a child is acting out behaviorally, we could understand why if the child has experienced grief. However, grief should not be an excuse for unacceptable behavior. So if the child is hurting you or hurting other people or acting in ways that are very inappropriate, we shouldn't dismiss that and say and give them grief as an excuse, like it's fine, just leave him, he's grieving. It's an explanation. So we still have to put limits, because that's what the child needs from us. They need us to guide them and not support any formation of bad habits. So a good way to do that is to actually provide the child with choices, so that way you're still in control, because you're the one that is coming up with those choices that are safe and acceptable, but they still have power and control to choose which of these choices they want to go with. So let me try to illustrate this in an example to make it a little bit more clear. So for example, if a child is grieving, or if they've just gone through a trauma, or there's currently a lot of changes happening in the house, we don't want to say, nope, we need you to stick to routines, because I know you have a need for safety, go to school, resume your life as per usual, because we still need to have a window of tolerance for them, But at the same time, we don't want to assume that, what they want is to just stay at home and not go to school. So you can present them with options to let them know that you're still in control, but they still get to choose depending on how they're feeling. So you can say, would you like to go to school today, or would you like to spend the day at your auntie's house? So kids that have a need for routine and to connect with their classmates and don't want to miss out on anything and just want to resume their life can choose that option. But the kids that are actually experiencing more emotions, are not able to be in that learning state, are experiencing more intensity in behaviors and emotion, might choose the other option. So just giving them options is actually really a really good way to also maintain safety, and so they can feel reassured as well. Now, the final need that we'll talk about today is the need for connection. This is the need to connect with you as the adult around them, or with the people around them, and with the person who has passed away. So the reason why I'm talking about this as the last need is because all the other needs that I've talked about connect to this particular need. So the need to feel connected to you, that can actually be achieved when you hear them out and acknowledge them. The need to be connected to the person who has passed away, that can actually be met by involving them, by addressing their need to be involved in processes related to the person who has passed away. The need to be connected to others around them, their friends, the communities that they've always known, their school, that need can be met by what I've just talked about, relating to routines and safety with routines. But just keep that need for connection in mind when you're going through all the other needs, because children actually really benefit from continuing their relationships with people, especially if they've lost a loved one, if they've lost a connection. It's even more important to increase the other connections, at least for a period of time. So I hope you found that helpful. I will leave you with two websites if you feel like you need more information related to grief and loss in general. Two really good websites, New Zealand-based websites, are griefcenter.org.nz and skylight.org.nz. Again, I wish you all the best and jazakumullah khair. Assalamu alaikum.